on grain exports, specifically on exports of most varieties of rice except basmati rice. If implemented, the ban would affect about 80% of India's rice exports. Such a move could lower domestic prices, but it risks sending global costs, which are already high, even higher. Rice is a staple for about half of the world's population, with Asia consuming about 90% of global supply. Benchmark prices have already soared to a two-year high on fears that the return of El Nino will damage crops. Well, joined by our correspondent there, Julia Champman from the newsroom with more on this particular story. Julia, good afternoon. Do you see the possibility of the Black Sea grain deal getting another lifeline?
Well, it all hinges on Russia and what it decides to do. We heard on Friday from the UN saying that a proposal put forward to the Kremlin was still being considered. That was aimed at lifting some of the hurdles that Russia has been complaining about when it comes to its own exports of food and fertilizer. It insists those have been hit because of sanctions, although sanctions do not directly apply to those areas. The Kremlin says that areas like insurance and shipping companies are wary of sanctions and therefore being overcautious when it comes to engaging with Russia. It wants to see those impediments lifted in order for it to get back to the drawing board on this grain deal. And in a phone call over the weekend, Russian President Vladimir Putin told his South African counterpart Cyril Ramaphosa that some of these hurdles simply hadn't been lifted yet, suggesting that Russia is wanting to see more progress before it agrees to another extension of the grain deal. It also wants an ammonia pipeline that goes through Ukraine to get back to use. It hasn't been used since the war began. Ukraine has been blocking that move. It could be under discussion now, but certainly there doesn't seem to be any sign that Russia is willing to continue extending this deal, which it has been warning for several weeks now is a deal that adversely impacts Russia, according to the Kremlin.
Julia, what could be the likely impact if this deal does not make any headway?
Well, there would certainly be a huge impact on the global food situation. Of course, this time last year, before the deal had been signed, there were warnings of a global food crisis. Exports of grain were not leaving Ukraine through the Black Sea because of the war. And once the deal was signed, it was credited with bringing about a 20% drop in food prices worldwide, a major lifeline to organizations like the World Food Programme, which relies very heavily on Ukrainian grain, which had been blocked. So undoubtedly, if there is suddenly another blockade of Ukrainian exports through the Black Sea, that will have a very dramatic impact on food prices globally, and that will be a big concern to many, including here in India, where as a result of food prices going up because of the El Nino phenomenon, which is causing droughts and monsoons, meaning that there have been impacted crops, there is a consideration now by the Indian government to ban exports much of the exports of rice from this country. That would help protect the domestic supply, help keep prices lower here in India, but it would mean that the rest of the world would see a drop in its supply of rice, and that would push prices up globally again.
Okay, we'll leave it there. Thank you and appreciate you joining us, Julia Champman.